It was supposed to be just another ordinary flight, but one seemingly small request unfolded into a much larger test. Does kindness always mean self-sacrifice? Amara's answer made everyone reconsider. Respect. And themselves. Midland Regional Airport, Houston, early June. The air was thick with the smell of jet fuel and the shimmering heat rising off the tarmac like ghostly waves. Amid the repetitive crackle of loudspeakers and the click-clack of rolling suitcases, Amara Brooks, 31, a marketing analyst, weaved her way through the crowd at Gate D12, clutching her laptop backpack tightly. She had been grinding through an exhausting week preparing for a critical presentation in Charlotte, North Carolina, a project that could change the entire course of her career. And now, Flight 317, a Boeing 737-800, was the bridge connecting her to that opportunity. No family, no boyfriend, just hard work and herself. Amara was used to moving alone. But this time, she had treated herself to a small luxury. Seat 12A, by the window, an extra $35 for a glimpse of the open sky, and a moment of peace in the middle of the grind. Amara slid into her seat, the leather creaking against her dark jeans. She fastened her seatbelt, tucked her backpack under the seat ahead, and leaned her head against the window. Outside, the brilliant Texas sun bathed the runway, making the oil slicks and silver planes shimmer as they waited for takeoff. She pulled a paperback thriller from her backpack, a novel she had promised herself as a reward after every brutal deadline, and slipped on her noise-canceling headphones. The chaotic buzz of the outside world quickly faded, replaced by a pocket of sweet silence. A small moment carved out just for her, a moment she had earned. Amara didn't fly for leisure. She flew to build dreams. One presentation, one marketing pitch distilled from sleepless nights, one lonely business trip into a bigger world at a time. Every time she boarded a plane, she reminded herself, I'm moving forward. A faint noise pulled her gaze upward. Passengers continued to file in, weary faces, hurried conversations, overhead bins slamming shut with mechanical clatters. But Amara had learned to insulate herself from that chaos. This was her small capsule. 12, a window seat. Sky. She leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. One deep breath. One small belief. If she could just make it through this flight, deliver that presentation, everything would change. No more scraping by on a paycheck stretched thin. No more skeptical glances at the color of her skin. She squeezed her headphones tighter, her heartbeat slowing. Peace. Ready for takeoff. Amara didn't know that in just a few minutes, that peace would be challenged. Not by mechanical failure or bad weather, but by something far more familiar. Senseless entitlement and unjustified demands. Things she knew too well, but had long endured in silence. But this time, Amara Brooks would not stay silent. The clack of a suitcase, stopping abruptly, echoed right beside row 12. Amara opened her eyes, removed one side of her headphones, and looked up. A middle-aged man, Gregory Stanton, 46 years old, gray-streaked hair slicked back, a silver watch gleaming beneath the cuff of his expensive dress shirt, stood there, gripping the hand of a little girl around 6 years old, who clutched a worn-out stuffed bunny tightly to her chest. The little girl's round eyes shimmered with tears, her face pale with worry. Amara blinked, momentarily confused. "Excuse me," he began, his voice just loud enough for an entire row to hear. "I need you to switch seats. She needs to sit by the window, so she won't be scared." Amara sat up straight, her fingers tightening around the book in her hands. "I'm sorry," she replied, gently but firmly. "I paid extra to choose this seat." Gregory Stanton raised his eyebrows, as if she had just insulted basic human decency. He glanced toward the empty seat at 12C, the aisle seat, and continued, his tone losing patience. "There's an empty spot right there. Just move. It's not a big deal." Amara held his gaze, polite but unyielding. "I understand she's frightened," Amara said, "but I also chose and paid for this seat. If you'd like, you can ask the flight attendant if there's another window seat available." The air around them seemed to thicken. A few nearby passengers turned their heads to watch. A tight-lipped flash of anger crossed Gregory's face. He bent down slightly, lowering his voice like he was scolding a child. "Can't you see she's just a little girl? Don't you have any compassion?" Amara felt her face flush hot. She had lived her whole life through moments like this. Moments where other people assumed their feelings should outweigh her rights, just because she didn't fit their image of compliant or soft. From seat 13B behind her, a woman whispered something to her companion. From 14C, a man subtly raised his phone, like he was ready to start recording. Every glance felt like a needle pinning Amara into her seat. The little girl clutched the stuffed bunny tighter, her wide eyes glistening with panic, and Amara felt a pang in her chest. But she also knew compassion didn't mean sacrificing your rightful place. Not again. She took a deep breath and answered, her voice steady. "I'm sorry. I can't switch." Gregory gave a sharp, dismissive laugh, a laugh with no attempt to hide his contempt. "The world's really going downhill," he sneered, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. The low buzz of murmurs rippled through the nearby rows. Amara gripped her book tighter, silently reminding herself, "Don't let them cast you as the villain in their story. You're not wrong." Just then, a flash of Navy uniform appeared in the aisle. Sandra Whitaker, late 40s, approached with eyes sharp as a laser beam. "Is there a problem here?" Sandra asked, her voice low and commanding. Gregory immediately turned to her, letting go of his daughter's hand, his voice tight with indignation. "Yes, her," he said, pointing straight at Amara. "She refuses to give up her seat for a little child." The air seemed to freeze. Amara sat still, meeting Sandra's gaze, bracing for the next battle. Sandra Whitaker gripped her flight manifest tightly, her calm eyes sweeping across the scene. "May I see your boarding passes, sir? For you and the young girl?" she asked, her voice crisp and professional. Gregory Stanton scowled, but reluctantly pulled out their tickets, waving them in front of Sandra as if they were some kind of magic shield. "We're in 14C and 14D, he stressed, almost shouting. "But she needs a window." He emphasized every word, clearly trying to stir sympathy from the surrounding passengers. Sandra nodded, her tone steady, unwavering. "You have been assigned the seats listed on your boarding passes. And so has she. If you'd like to switch seats, we will assist in finding an available window seat. But she is under no obligation to move." Gregory clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Seeing he wasn't getting the backing he expected, he pivoted, choosing to attack Amara directly. "This is shameful," he growled, facing her head on. A grown woman so selfish she'd steal a child's sense of safety just for a little bit of comfort. A few murmurs rippled through the cabin. A handful of judgmental glances shot toward Amara like invisible arrows. Amara could feel the pressure building with every heartbeat. She bit her lip hard, willing her hands not to tremble with rage. She knew this game all too well. Force her into the center of scrutiny, paint her as the embodiment of cold-heartedness. All because she had dared to say no. Gregory kept going like he was performing on stage. "There are people like that," he said, loud enough for several rows to hear, folding his arms across his chest and scanning the cabin with a look of disdain. "People who only think of themselves." Amara gripped the book in her lap tighter, summoning every ounce of strength just to stay calm. She felt exposed, stripped bare under dozens of staring eyes, an overwhelming, suffocating firestorm of loneliness and anger. No one stood up for her. No one asked why Gregory hadn't bought better seats for his daughter in the first place. To prevent Gregory from further disturbing the cabin, Monica took the initiative to propose an unexpected solution. "Sir, you have two options," she said calmly. "One, return to the seats you were assigned. Or two, I could check if there are seats available in first class, if you're willing to pay the fare difference." Gregory's mouth fell open. The entire cabin fell silent for 3 full heartbeats. No one had expected Monica to be so direct, using his own status and wallet to counter his tantrum. A young guy in a hoodie over in 15B snickered, barely suppressing a whistle. A woman in 13C shook her head slowly, clearly savoring this rare moment of justice. Gregory, His face flushed with humiliation, ground his teeth, but finally muttered something under his breath and yanked his daughter toward 14C, dragging her along like luggage. The little girl cast an awkward, almost apologetic glance toward Amara, while her father didn't look at anyone. Monica didn't let the energy deflate. She stepped closer to Amara and asked gently, "Would you like me to move you to another seat if you feel unsafe?" Amara, with the entire cabin holding its breath for her answer, smiled, a calm yet defiant smile. "No, thank you. I'm fine. I'll stay in the seat I chose." A few scattered claps erupted from somewhere in the back, and a few more joined in, until the entire cabin was filled with awkward, yet genuine, applause. Monica simply nodded. No excessive praise, no dramatics. She turned and returned to her duties, leaving Amara by her wide window, gripping the small pocket of space she had fought to keep, not just for herself, but for the dignity that people like her could never afford to let be trampled. Gregory Stanton slumped into 14C, his face still burning red with rage. He yanked his seatbelt across his lap with an angry tug, then cast sidelong glances at Amara Brooks, as if she were the cause of all his misfortunes today. Not ready to admit defeat, Gregory began campaigning among the other passengers. He twisted in his seat toward those behind him, raising his voice dramatically, trying to fish for sympathy. Truly disappointing. A 6-year-old child, terrified, and not a single person would give up a seat? Is this what we call a civilized society? Several passengers buried their faces in their phones. Others shut their eyes, pretending to sleep. Not a single soul responded. Gregory lowered his voice, but still spoke just loud enough for others to hear. Shameful. Grown adults, selfish. A little girl has to suffer. But just a minute later, the sharp sound of a seat snapping upright echoed right beside her. Gregory Stanton shot up from 14C, his hand gripping the seat back in front of him, face flushed, chin jutted like he was about to explode. He leaned in close to Amara, voice low but razor-edged, deliberately loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Typical, just one word, but sliced through the air like a cold blade, sharp and calculated. Amara opened her eyes. She stared directly at Gregory, her deep brown gaze radiating a calm, so intense it was almost terrifying. She knew exactly what that word meant. So did many others in the cabin, and a heavy silence began to spread. It wasn't just an ordinary insult. Typical, coming from the mouth of a white man in this exact context, carried layers of coded disdain, ingrained bias, and a quiet, smug condescension wrapped in feigned civility. The young man in 15B, the one in the hoodie, sat up straighter, eyes flashing. "What the hell did you just say?" A middle-aged woman in 13D looked up, dropping her magazine into her lap. "We heard that loud and clear, sir." Monica Hayes, the lead flight attendant, rushed over, her face now stripped of any professional smile. She stepped squarely between Amara and Gregory, voice glacial. "Mr. Stanton, this is your final warning. If there is any further racist, disruptive, or abusive behavior, you'll be removed from this aircraft immediately." Gregory let out a scoff, smug and defiant. "Oh, so now free speech is banned too, huh?" Monica didn't flinch. She gave a subtle nod to a tall, crew member stationed at the front of the cabin, Trevor Briggs, the in-flight security officer. Trevor stepped forward without hesitation, one hand on his radio. "Captain, we got a situation in the main cabin. Requesting instruction." Amara still said nothing. She simply sat there, upright, eyes locked on Gregory, not with rage, but with an icy contempt that said more than words ever could. Whispers rippled through the surrounding seats. A man in 16A raised his phone, discreetly recording everything. A young woman in 12C blurted out, loud enough for the whole row to hear, "No one made you embarrass yourself like this, Mr. Stanton." Cornered, Gregory stomped back to his seat. His face was tight with tension, lips pressed into a furious straight line. But the flight crew wasn't letting it go. Trevor stepped forward, his hand resting gently on Gregory's back. Not aggressive, but firm, unmistakably authoritative. "Sir," he said evenly, please gather your belongings. We'll continue this conversation on the ground. Gregory's mouth fell open, stammering in protest. I didn't do anything. But one look at Trevor's cold stare and Monica's firm nod told him there was no way out. Muttering curses under his breath, Gregory yanked his bag from under the seat and barked at his daughter to get up. The little girl, pale and visibly shaken, clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, eyes wide with fear. She didn't say a word. Gregory marched toward the front of the cabin, every step heavy with bitter humiliation. When he finally disappeared past the cabin door, it was as if the entire plane exhaled in relief. Monica crouched beside Amara's seat, voice soft and sincere. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Amara gave a small nod. "I'm fine." Her voice was low, steady, as if the storm that had just passed had been nothing more than a stress test for the strength she had long carried in silence. Outside the window, the runway stretched out ahead, wide, smooth, endless. A new journey was waiting. The cabin door clicked shut behind Gregory Stanton, and the tension aboard Flight 317 finally began to ease. Amara Brooks tightened her grip on the paperback in her lap, willing her heart rate to settle. But deep down, she knew men like Gregory didn't fade quietly into the background. Sure enough, not even 5 minutes later, just as passengers began fastening their seatbelts for takeoff, a loud crash exploded from the rear of the plane. Gregory Stanton, his face crimson and eyes ablaze with hate, had slammed through the cabin door and charged back into the aircraft. A wave of panic swept the cabin. Screams erupted. Several passengers unbuckled in a flash, standing up in alarm. Amara looked up just in time to see Gregory storming straight toward row 12. He stopped just inches from her, his voice a low, venomous growl as he jabbed a finger toward her face. "You think you've won? I know you're kind." The air turned thick, heavy, like the moment before a violent thunderclap. A frozen heartbeat. And then, Monica Hayes moved like lightning. Monica launched down the aisle like a bolt of lightning, placing herself squarely between Gregory and Amara. Right behind her, Trevor Briggs, the flight's designated security officer, appeared tall, solid, and sharp-eyed. "Mr. Stanton," Monica barked, her voice echoing through the cabin. "Step back immediately. You are threatening a passenger and endangering the safety of this flight." Gregory flinched for a moment, but his fury had clouded all reason. He growled through gritted teeth, "I'm just trying to teach this girl a lesson in basic respect." Before he could finish, Trevor signaled the captain through his radio. "Captain, we need immediate security intervention." Seconds later, Captain Michael Reed, a seasoned pilot with a face carved from stone, stepped out of the cockpit. He scanned the scene once and saw everything he needed to know. "Mr. Stanton," he said, voice calm but razor sharp, "you are being removed from this flight for threatening a passenger and violating federal safety regulations. Gather your belongings. Now." Gregory's mouth fell open in stunned disbelief. No one spoke up for him. No one intervened. He stammered, "But my daughter." Michael's tone didn't waver. "Your daughter will be accommodated on another flight." "You will not." Trevor stepped forward, firm but measured, placing a hand on Gregory's elbow. "You can walk off this plane or be escorted in cuffs and handed to airport security. Your choice." Realizing he had no way out, Gregory clenched his jaw, shot one last glare at Amara, and began to gather his things in silence. His footsteps pounded down the aisle like the weight of his own disgrace dragging behind him. His daughter, the poor little girl, stood frozen near the cabin door, clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly as tears welled in her round cheeks. Amara's chest tightened. She didn't hate the child. She hated the arrogance Gregory had tried to pass down to her like some twisted legacy. As Gregory was escorted off the aircraft, the cabin fell into a hush for just a beat. And then a slow wave of applause began, at first from a few nearby rows, then building like a tide. Not rowdy, not chaotic, just firm, deliberate claps. A silent confirmation, a stand for dignity. Amara remained seated, spine straight, eyes fixed out the window. She didn't need to win with words. She only needed not to bow. As the plane rolled toward the runway, the intercom chimed. Cabin, prepare for takeoff. Amara closed her eyes, letting the weight of the past hour melt into the vast sky ahead. The aircraft door had finally shut behind Gregory Stanton, sealing away all the hostility and chaos he had tried to unleash. In the cabin, a nearly tangible wave of relief spread through the passengers, like everyone could finally exhale again. Monica Hayes, walking past, gave Amara Brooks a gentle squeeze on the shoulder, her eyes full of quiet affirmation. "We're sorry for the inconvenience, Ms. Brooks," Monica said, her voice warm but firm. "But you did the right thing." Amara nodded, lips pressed together. She didn't need an apology. She needed respect, and today, for once, she had earned it. Along the rows of seats, several passengers turned to look at her, some nodding in support, others offering faint, respectful smiles. A middle-aged man in 13C leaned slightly forward and murmured, "You stood your ground. That was admirable." Amara returned a small, measured smile. Inside, she knew. If she had backed down today, then tomorrow, and the day after, and every day to come, more men like Gregory would appear, demanding that she surrender under the guise of politeness. Politeness that was always expected from people like her. The Boeing 737-800 gave a subtle shudder as it pushed back from the gate. Captain Michael Reed's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be airborne as soon as we receive clearance." Outside the window, the runway of Midland Regional Airport in Houston stretched ahead, glowing under the amber wash of evening lights. Amara leaned her forehead against the cool glass, her arms relaxing at last, the tension slowly bleeding out of her chest. The image of Gregory's daughter, clutching her stuffed bunny, tear-filled eyes wide with confusion, lingered somewhere in her mind. Amara sighed quietly. She hoped, somehow, the little girl would grow up differently, free of the toxic expectations and quiet cruelty passed down by the generation before her. As the plane began to speed down the runway, the engines roared, powerful, unwavering, like the thrum of Amara's own heartbeat. Takeoff, leaving behind the judgment, the sideways glances, the veiled accusations. The sky ahead was vast, and Amara knew. Today, she hadn't just held onto a seat. She had held onto her right to exist, to be respected, without apology, without compromise. For hours in the air, to Charlotte, might seem long, but for Amara Brooks, they were 4 hours of freedom. Amara opened her eyes as the plane leveled out at cruising altitude. The cabin lights glowed softly, casting a peaceful hush that felt surreal after the earlier storm. She quietly turned the page of her book, though her thoughts still drifted, suspended between moments. No yelling, no arguing, just calm resolve. And in that, she had protected her rights. More than that, she had preserved her dignity. She recalled Gregory Stanton's eyes, furious, expectant, certain that if he pushed hard enough, she would fold. But she didn't. Not because she needed to win, but because she understood every time you back down in the face of injustice, no matter how small, you give away a piece of your right to be respected. Flight attendant Monica Hayes passed by, pausing briefly to offer Amara a warm, knowing nod before continuing down the aisle. A small gesture, but to Amara, it felt like an affirmation. From the passengers who quietly stood up for her to the firm stance of the flight crew, everything seemed to say, steadfastness has its own power. A power that doesn't need shouting or fists, just the resolve to stand firm, like a mountain bracing against a storm. Outside the window, the night sky stretched wide and endless. The stars sparkled like tiny, indestructible seeds of hope. Amara smiled softly. She didn't know how many more moments like this she'd have to face in her life. But she knew one thing for certain. She would never let the world define her worth by appearances. Not today. Not ever. And sometimes, the greatest lessons don't come from loud battles, but from quiet moments when you stand up, not for anyone else, but for yourself. At dawn, As Flight 317 landed in Charlotte, sunlight filtered faintly through the misted oval windows. Amara Brooks stood quietly in the line of passengers disembarking, her crossbody bag held close to her chest, shoulders upright and steady as though no storm had just passed. As she stepped off the plane, Monica Hayes gave her a small smile, a nearly imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement. "You did the right thing." Amara answered with a faint smile of her own. No more words were needed. Outside, the terminal buzzed with hurried travelers, merging into the rush of a new day. But for Amara, this wasn't just another morning. It was a beginning. As she rolled her suitcase through the terminal, she felt it deep in her bones, that sometimes being an adult isn't about shrinking yourself to avoid confrontation. It's about standing tall and defending what's right, even in the face of the smallest injustices. Because true kindness doesn't come from sacrificing your self-worth to please others. It comes from knowing your value and refusing to trade it away. A little girl would grow up one day and learn how to be brave. A privileged man might finally face the boundaries of his entitlement. And a woman like Amara Brooks, with all her calm, all her dignity, had left behind a wordless imprint, a quiet but powerful declaration of self-respect. As Amara stepped through the airport doors, the humid Texas heat rushed over her like a blunt greeting. She lifted her chin. A long day lay ahead, and she was ready.